All right. Welcome to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect, everyone. Today is going to be a special episode with Dimming the Gaslight. That's his name on Instagram, too. And this is going to be a cool episode because there's a lot of people talking right now about parental alienation, how narcissistic people will weaponize their children against their ex. And his story will be pretty interesting. And how are you today, Mac?
Oh man, thank you for having me. This is really cool to be here. I feel a little I don't know, challenged because usually A, I'm on the other side of the table, and B, my episodes aren't usually live. So it's pretty cool to be here.
Yeah, we like to keep you on the edge of your seat here. And it is a skill, the live stuff here. It is a different ball game than recording. I warn you.
Cool, I'm into it.
So you were telling me before we went live here about the origin of Dimming the Gaslight. And I think the audience would love to hear about how you came up with that name to begin with.
Yeah, thanks. I'm proud of the name. It's a cool name that so long story short is I had a friend I have a friend now who, when I was still in my home, I was listening to his podcast and I didn't know the guy, but I had just discovered narcissism and I was in question of whether or not I had experienced narcissistic abuse. So I was listening to this guy, and I reached out to him via email. And ultimately, he became one of my closest confidants, in this whole narcissism sphere. So he told me, he's like, why don't you start your own podcast? So him and another one of my friends, we were just kicking around names one day. And my goal was I wanted to talk about healing, because I think healing is the ultimate destination. That's when you're off the island. You know what I mean? When you get to healing. So I said I wanted the original name of the podcast to be Our Healing Journey from Narcissistic Abuse, because I think it's a journey, but it just wasn't sexy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So my friend goes, well, what do you do to a gaslight? And then my other friend goes, you extinguish it. And I go, well, you can't extinguish it, but you can dim it. And we all did that whole hands up in the air and the face goes back and we go, dimming the gaslight. Fuck. Yahtzee, right? Hey, can I curse on this?
Absolutely.
Good. So dimming the gaslight became the thing. And then so I go by the name Mac, and the story behind that is when I was still in the home and I discovered narcissism, I wanted to again educate myself on narcissism. And I didn't want my next, I refer to her as my next, my narcissistic ex, to know that I was following narcissistic accounts. So I was making my kids macaroni and sauce in the kitchen, and I created a burner account on Instagram, and it was called the Macaroni King 1447. It meant nothing. But I started getting some traction. I started posting things, and when I switched over to Dimming the Gaslight, I had a follower and she's super sweet. And she said, yeah, I'm going to listen to your podcast, but can I still call you Mac? So Mac is a nod to that guy almost 2 years ago who needed this guy now. And, long live the Macaroni King.
And I don't think any of those stories were told before. You didn't tell those stories.
Not the first one about how I came up with Dimming the Gaslight, but I did tell the story about, I did a Q&A episode for my 1 year anniversary of this podcast. And I did a Q&A episode and somebody asked me, is your real name Mac? And I told that story. And no, so I want to address the elephant in the room a little bit. I'm not on camera right now. And the reason that I'm not on camera is because I am on trial. Just like any other trial that you see on TV, I am on trial right now for domestic abuse that I did not commit. Because of this, I am very guarded over the identity of my 7-year-old and my 4-year-old, who I don't want them to know daddy's doing this. My next does know about the podcast, and we can get into that a little bit down the line. But I'm very protective of my anonymity because I also kind of feel like Dimming the Gaslight isn't really just mine. It's kind of everybody's mission statement, is to kind of dim the bullshit of their necks. So I'm not on camera. One day I will be, but for right now, I prefer to stay anonymous.
Yeah. And I was reading one of Sam Vaknin's books before, and he said that the goal is to diminish in power and significance the power the narcissistic person has over your life, which, of course, in a co-parenting situation becomes tougher.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm here, right? I'm here to discuss, parental alienation. And I just mentioned that, I've been accused I have false accusations on me. So maybe it's worth doing a little qualifying about how I got here. So back in October of 2021, my next alleges that I had strangled her on my daughter's bedtime while she was holding her. Unbeknownst to me, she got a restraining order on me, and I was in my home. In 15, the cops showed up, told me to case and get out. During that time, I spent 4 days, 42 suns up, 42 suns down, with zero communication with my kids. I was not allowed to communicate with my kids. They didn't know what had happened to me. They didn't know where daddy was. I just vanished one day. And then when the court ruled that I can have visits with my kids or communicate with them. So 42 days was the hardest time of my life. And then it turned into, I was allowed to have supervised phone calls, not visits, supervised phone calls, because I was such a menace. And then I had to have supervised visits. And then ultimately the supervised visits got dropped. And so then about 8 months later, my younger son is 7 years old. He plays football, and during a football practice gone awry, my next alleges that I was abusing the children in public. Now, the funny thing is I refer to my nexus town as Pleasantville because again, anonymous, but I think Pleasantville is a funny name. And so my next grew up in Pleasantville. She works in Pleasantville. Her family's from Pleasantville. They've been there for 65 years. So at this football field, the people who are onlookers at this game know my next for her entire life. So what happened ultimately is I went to the police station first. The police did not give me the option for a TRO in Pleasantville. But because the police know my next, they gave it to her. And after spending 42 days with no kids, this time was 59 days, no talk with kids. Then when that got dropped, I had to have supervised visits 1 hour a week with my kids. Only 1 hour I was allowed a week at a local YMCA. So I have been, you want to talk about parental alienation. I have, and keep in mind, I'm no longer in the home. I barely talk to my kids. They love me. But it's been a ongoing fight just to get back to my kids.
It seems like what she's been doing is working in that regard. Now, if you can go back, is there anything that you would have done differently with it that could help you now, or something your lawyer said that would have been helpful to do? Because there are people this is probably happening to right now as well, where they're getting false charges.
Hindsight is always 20/20, right? And we always look back and we always say, oh, fuck, I wish I would have left when when all this was going wrong, or I wish I never had kids with them. And the truth is I probably would have. I mean, it's hard to say would I have done anything differently, because at the time when I was experiencing narcissistic abuse, like many of us, we didn't know that we were. You know what I'm saying? So it'd be easy for me to say I would do something different, but I'm not sure that I would. Now, armed with the knowledge that I have, what I know now is not to feed into it. And I'm just like, I'm a human being. Like we communicate through our family wizard now. If anybody knows about our family wizard.
Yep, that's a good thing.
So we communicate through our family wizard, and I admit sometimes I slip up, and she sent me something yesterday about like common courtesy, and I was like, please don't ever talk to me about common courtesy. But like, it's just funny, like knowing what I know now, it's just like I don't feed into it. I have something like 51 unread messages on our family wizard, because it's just accusations and nonsense, and I have the proof to beat it. Really what it is I need to be able to get in front of a judge to do it.
Now, is there anything specific, though, about facing false charges that you would say, hey, guys, hey, ladies out there, if this happens to you, you should do this?
Yeah. Thanks for touching on that. And this is something that's very near and dear to my heart, is that I want to go on record right now of saying narcissistic abuse is narcissistic abuse. And I just recently did an episode for the podcast called Narcissistic Abuse Knows No Gender. I don't care if you're a man. I don't care if you're a woman. I don't care what you identify as. In my book, we are all on this road together. So to answer your question, my best advice is document. And I've been saying this since episode 1. I had Ring camera doorbells installed in front of my house. So on the day that she alleges that I strangled her, there's times when she says that I did certain things that I wasn't even home. I have text messages. Another thing worth mentioning is that it was October 17th, 2021, when she alleges that I strangled her. She didn't file the restraining order until October 30th. Okay, so about 13 days later. And I have tons of documentation to show where I was, what I was doing. Was I even home? You have to get a little technologically savvy in order to beat these false allegations. But in 2023, with the way technology is, I mean, you have, I'm sure anybody listening to this, you have text messages, you have, start recording, learn your recording laws. I'm from New Jersey, you're from New Jersey. This is what's called a one-party state. In a one-party state, you are allowed to record without anybody else knowing. If you live in a two-party state, you must have their permission. So in New Jersey, I started recording every conversation we have. And it shows that she's blocking rooms. She won't let me leave. I have one recording where she says, "When are you leaving?" After the 17th. It shows her end run at divorce. It was divorce planning. It was straight up divorce planning. And she knew the best way to get me out of my home that I still owned, that my name was on the mortgage. The best way to get me out was false allegations. And that's what she went ahead and did.
It's wild they can get away with so much. And what I hear from people's stories are, it's like the courts and the law and the cops, they can do so little to stop it, it seems a lot of times. And they get a lot of leeway to do a lot of damage.
Yeah. And the thing is that when they're doing this damage, like you said, we are versed in narcissism. We're versed in what we go through. And I can only speak for myself, but I find my demeanor and my language and my voice is all getting elevated. And we look like the crazy one because we know these are false allegations. The things that they accuse you of are usually so far out of your character that, like, I sit there and I start screaming and yelling. And I've had recent experiences with cops where like they have to investigate and they have to do this. And I go, "What are you investigating? This is my time. This is my time with my kids. She doesn't need to be here. She's just lingering around and enforce my parenting time." So false allegations, that's what they want you to do. They want you to, is it prove a negative? Like, is that what it's called? Like, it's hard to prove a negative, right? You can prove that. I don't know. I'm going kind of on a tangent here, but yeah, it's hard to disprove.
It's one of the ways they provoke, for sure. They'll provoke you by blaming you for doing things you didn't do. And it's hard. It's hard not to have an emotional reaction to that, which unfortunately, when you have the emotional reaction, it can seem like you're guilty to the outside parties, like you said, which is why the emotional self-control part and the no jade, justify, argue, defend, explain, it's hard, but that is really the only way to go because that's what makes you look more innocent as well.
Right. And the thing is too, is like, early on when I said I discovered narcissism, I discovered the term gray rocking, and I'm an emotional person by nature, and gray rocking for me is difficult. Sure. I show my emotions, right? But another thing is that I learned from a guy named Matt Pfeiffer, who was on my podcast, and Matt's got a pretty substantial platform on TikTok and Instagram. I learned about just really the truth of no contact. And I can't go no contact because I do have kids with this person. But like, for example, like I said, I have 51 unread Our Family Wizard messages because, like, what am I going to do? Is there ever going to be a day when she sits back and goes, "You know what, Mac, I see your point. You're right. I'll knock it off." Like, never. So what is the point? It's literally talking to a brick wall. Right. So I sit back and I kind of decipher what's worth my effort and what's not. And my time is so filled up in the first place, man, that I don't have effort to dedicate to somebody who's committed to misunderstanding me.
That's exactly the phrase I was going to use too. They are committed to misinterpreting and giving you the least charitable interpretation of everything you say and everything you do.
It's funny too, like, and I've had this slogan long before narcissism, but I have this slogan that I always use with my friends, and it's that I'd rather have 4 quarters than 100 pennies. And what that means is to me is like, I don't need a lot of people. I don't need friends. Like, fuck your smear campaign. Go ahead and do your smear campaign on me, because those people, as you just said, are committed to misunderstanding you and misinterpreting you. So the 4 quarters, and I have more than 4 quarters in my life, but those people that are close to me, they love me, they believe in me, they've witnessed me with my kids and with my next, and they know the caliber of person I am. So of course I have trolls and I have haters and whatever, and that's fine. It runs off my back like water off a goose, man. But at the end of the day, I feel my responsibility is to be the good dad that these kids need, because they're undoubtedly going to be affected by this.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So I got to be who I am. I'm allowed to be a disciplinarian. I did a recent episode on a podcast. Actually, my last episode was about my son wants to play football, but when he comes to me, before he gets in my car, he's screaming and crying because his mom fills him with fear before he gets in my car, and he's screaming and crying. And I just gave my son consequences that he can't play football if he's going to be freaking out. And that's a really condensed version of the story. But yeah, it's important to be there for your kids in the magnitude that they need you.
Right. And I was listening to that episode on Spotify, and then one of the previous episodes you were talking about how one of the police officers, they didn't give you the option for a TRO, temporary restraining order. So that is something that if you would have done, what do you think would have changed if you were able to do that, or you had that option?
Dude, so I had a lawyer, right, that I couldn't pay, and eventually they dropped me. But the reason I'm saying this is that one of the rare poignant things that he said to me is that she's not playing this game better than you. If this is a game of poker, she's not playing the game better than you. She just sat down at the table with all the chips. Okay. So the TRO is what made her rich in terms of leverage and advantage and all that kind of stuff, because we'd love to believe that you're innocent until proven guilty, but you are certainly not. In the eyes of in my court system, you are not innocent until proven guilty. I have served as if I'm guilty. So had that police officer given me the option for a TRO, it would have leveled the playing field. It would have leveled the playing field so that, well, I do have police reports too that she stalked me and things like that. And I actually declined a TRO because I couldn't pay for it. It's just such a crazy situation. But to answer your question, right now I'm trying to systematically take away those chips, because she just sat down at the table with more chips than me, but she's not playing the game better.
I guess the reason why I bring that up is in case there's other people right now that are in a similar spot. Maybe if they do the TRO, they can be the one that's at the table they're not on the defensive, right? Because that's something that they got you on. They got you on the defensive by doing that.
I'm totally with you. I made this deal with myself like early on in this, that if I'm going to go to the police, it's only going to be for real shit that she does to me. I am not going to stoop to her level and make false allegations without any evidence. That's the other thing. So going back to document. If you're going to make a report, if you're going to try, and I have tried for a TRO against my next 2 to 3 times for separate occasions. And it's been declined because the judge says, if you could see me, man, I'm about 6 foot, maybe about 220 pounds. So I'm not small in stature, and she's probably 5'4", 115 pounds maybe. So the judge has deemed that she's not in any danger, and it's not fair,
This is perception. Perception is that.
Man, the damage that a 5'4", 115 pound girl is capable of doing. It's unlike anything I was going to say unlike anything you could imagine, but your listeners know what we're going through. So we know the fight that we're going through, so you can imagine it. But to answer your question, it would have leveled the playing field.
Now, another question I have is, it's interesting the dynamic you have with your lawyer, where it's a woman and she comes on your show sometimes too, which kind of surprised me. I almost thought she would say to you, yes, talk as little about it as possible. But instead it's the opposite. She's on the show. So let's talk about that for a minute.
What's up, Brittany Parisi out of Parisi Law in New Jersey? Brittany, I absolutely love you. So going back, I had another lawyer. I couldn't pay him, but it was funny. Like, I'd rather ask for permission or I'd rather ask for forgiveness than permission.
I like that saying.
So I never asked my last lawyer if I could do this, because you know what? It was so integral to my healing. So that lawyer ultimately dropped me because I couldn't pay him. And I was on Instagram one day, and Brittany Parisi at a Parisi law firm reached out to me, and we got to talking and stuff. And she was asking me about the podcast, and I was like, listen, it's doing well. At this time I have like 60,000 listeners in like 70 countries around the world. I was like, it's this small mom and pop podcast that I do for my 1-bedroom apartment, but it's doing well. And so, Brittany was really encouraged by that. And so it was around Christmas time. And again, I had only seen my kids at the time. I was able to see my kids for 1 hour every week supervised. And because of that, I had seen my kids for 5 hours in 99 days. 5 hours in 99 days. So I said, hey, Brittany, you want to earn your stripes right away? And she goes, yeah. I go, get me my kids for Christmas. And I said, I will do a podcast, just like any sitcom, right? You watch like, Seinfeld or whatever. There's a Christmas episode. I said, we need a Christmas episode of this podcast in real time. I said, so let's get my goddamn kids for Christmas. And Brittany did a motion. Immediately, the judge deemed it as an emergency, because the courts don't know what you don't spoon feed them. Right. So immediately the court deemed an emergency. I was in court later that afternoon, and I got my kids for Christmas. So episode 50 of the podcast is called The Lawyer That Saved Christmas, because Brittany went to bat for me, and it's so funny.
It worked.
About it all the time. Yeah. So the answer to your question, I was already doing this podcast before I met Brittany. And so she's come on the podcast, and we recap trial moments, because I'm on like day 7 of a DV trial of something I didn't commit. But here's another story for you. And, don't get the punchy name Dimming the Gaslight confused. I'm actually an idiot. And so what I did is, it was a Zoom court meeting, and I do a lot of my interviews for the podcast on Zoom. And before I got on, I went on my personal account, I double checked everything, and I logged into Zoom for the court with Dimming the Gaslight. And my neck's found out, and now the cat's out of the bag. So she knows about this. And she's lucky, man. I'm still protecting her anonymity, because I'm protecting the kids' anonymity. But I made a post last night on Instagram. I just Googled Dimming the Gaslight, and like the top searches for Dimming the Gaslight are like Dimming the Gaslight wife Instagram, Dimming the Gaslight wife Reddit, Dimming the Gaslight wife TikTok. So people want to know who she is. Spoiler alert, she sucks. She's not that great. But no, my lawyer has been really cool with this whole thing. And she's really, really, it's amazing, because a lot of us struggle to get a lawyer, a good lawyer who's versed in narcissism. And I have helped Brittany become versed in narcissism, but she's really, really, really internalized my story to the point where like she can say it back to me, and I'll be like, yeah, like, were you there? Like it's almost like she was there. And it's really, I feel so comfortable. Sometimes I get to court before Brittany, and I don't feel comfortable until she walks to the door, because this is my captain in battle. You know what I mean? She's wearing the big C on her collar. And she has really gone to bat for me, and I appreciate everything she does for me.
Yeah, it's definitely great to have someone like her in your corner. And I think it does help you to have a woman lawyer as well, just like it helped maybe Johnny Depp in his trial.
Yes, sir.
But I think that the image of that, unfortunately, does matter.
Yeah. I mean, it's really a testament to how well she tells the story too. And yes, I did want a woman lawyer. My last lawyer was a man. I did want a woman lawyer. I am the only man in the courtroom, and I kind of like it that way. But then for the same token, I'm judged on my demeanor and my, I'm judged on my demeanor, but, it's fine, like, and like I said, she's really found a way to articulate my story, just as well as I can. So I know that my fate is in her hands, and I trust her, with the utmost trust.
Yeah, that is awesome. Now, what are the other tactics that your next will use to weaponize the children against you? And we know about the false allegations, but what are the kind of stuff that she'll maybe whisper in their ear, if you know what they are?
Oh, it's nonstop, man. I mean, Most recently, so I have a call with my kids. Actually, I have one later this evening. So my next 5 weeks after she evicted me from my home, she got a new boyfriend. And my listeners have come to know him as Fireman John. Okay. And so she sleeps at Fireman John's house. The kids sleep there. I mean, literally, she kicked me out and inserted him into my role. And so recently on a call with the kids, so I'm a diehard New York Giants football fan. And just so happens, what's that face about, man?
Well,
no, we're not going to get into it.
Patriots fan here, but continue.
That's okay. We beat you twice in the Super Bowl. So, so Fireman John has seasons Giants tickets. And so I was doing a call with my kids the other day, and so the kids are in the back seat and they're going, hey, guess what? John's going to take us to a Giants game. And my next goes, shut up, like trying to, because she doesn't want me to know that, he's, taking my first with the kids. I mean, it's just little shit like that, like all the time. Like, when I mentioned they get out of the car and it's like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's only 2 days sleeping at daddy's house. Keep each other safe.
The dramatics.
Yeah. If you need me, I'm only a call away. And then you should see the kids here. Like they set up my phone. They do slow motion videos of us all leaping into the bed in slow motion, making funny faces. Like my kids are everything to me. And, this might not be something that you hear from a lot of men, maybe more from women, but I always thought I would be, my life goal was to be a dad. I wanted to be a dad. I admit, I love my son, man. We play Ghostbusters and Ninja Turtles and all those nostalgia things. And, I love my kids, and my next knows that. So she uses them as the carrot that's dangling in front of my face because she knows I'll fight for it. So she'll weaponize them in any way she can because she knows nothing else matters to me in my life besides them.
Now, what would you recommend to men and women, for that matter, that are in your situation with that now?
Document. Learn all your rules. Learn. So like I mentioned before, right? So we're in the state of New Jersey. So if you're in the state of Utah, right? Know if you're a one-party state or two-party state. Start recording. See, when I started recording, I was just doing it because I wanted to verify that like the story that my next told me yesterday doesn't match up with the story that she's telling me today. I didn't really anticipate that this was going to be used in court. So my answer is just like document. Make sure you know your recording laws. There's a feature. There's a feature on your iPhone. If you go, your iPhone will delete messages after a certain time. So like, let's say like 30 days past. All those like bullshit, like, log into your bank account. Here's your passcode and stuff. Delete all those. You don't need those forever, right? But set that setting to never delete, because I have not texted my next in 2 years, and I have every text for so long. So there's really ways to create evidence. I mentioned I have a ring camera doorbell to show my whereabouts. You can go into the cloud. There's those 3 little dots. If you're paying for Ring, you can download those things to your computer and save them forever. The false allegations, if she says, you hit me on XYZ date, it's not enough to just sit there and go, no, I didn't. Right. It's not enough. So, and also another thing that I've heard, not only from my current lawyer, but my old lawyer, is once we establish who the liar is in court, that kind of helps the trajectory of the rest of your divorce case.
That makes sense.
And another thing I would say too is like, I have a lot of listeners who reach out to me and I'm in the same boat, and they go, I just want this to be over. I just want to be divorced. I want him or her out of my life, and I want this to be over. And I say, not so fast, right? Especially like women, they say like, I don't want his name anymore. And I say, well, here's the thing, right? You need to make sure that MSA, which is like the final thing you sign before your divorce, make sure that shit is ironclad. And what I really mean by that is like, you got to make sure there's no loopholes, because they want to harass and stay in your consciousness for the rest of your fucking life. So there's nothing about that MSA that can be subjective. So truth be told, like, I would love to be divorced. I would love to be divorced 2 years ago, but I'm still a ways off of that. And I want to make sure that that MSA is ironclad. Holidays, weekends, family, school, future bills. I mean, bills is such a huge part for all of us. That MSA, there can't be any loopholes for them to squeeze through, because once they do, I mean, we all know they're going to harass us for the rest of our lives, but we got to make sure that, everything is not open to interpretation. It's got to be so specific.
And I think you make a good point about the text messages automatically deleting, because I think you do have to turn that off now on iPhone, because I think it automatically does start deleting text messages. So it's important for anyone in that situation, go in there and turn that off.
Yeah,
so
mine
it doesn't automatically.
Mine was set to 30 days and now it's set to never. So yeah, go into it's in settings, go to your messages. And I forget what the other thing is. I mean, you can reach out to me, DM me on Instagram or something, and I'll try and help you with it. But yeah, that's a big part of it, because I have, at the time she's alleging that I strangled her, she's texting me pictures of my daughter's birthday party. So was she texting me pictures of my daughter's birthday party while I was strangling her?
Now, are they able to make that allegation without any sort of physical evidence at all? Like, they can just say that and they'll take it as word.
I just, truth. I'm not on camera, but I just looked at you and I just did the same shrug you just did. I was like, yeah, you're literally like, bullshit. You're innocent until proven guilty. You are guilty until proven innocent. And I said that right, man. I have not been, no entity has found me guilty of a single fucking thing, but I have paid the price besides jail, which she's tried to get me in jail too. I have paid the price as if I was guilty. And, what that restitution will be like. Obviously, I dream about on a daily basis of what kind of restitution I can get for my missed time with my kids and my hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. The restitution will be beautiful. But then that's a thing too. So Brittany Parisi, my lawyer out of New Jersey, she told me there's two things, right? There's legal justice and there's social justice. So legal justice, she says, you have this whole fantasy in your head that they're going to, in the court, stand her up and read her Miranda rights and she's going to go right to jail. She goes, that shit's not going to happen, man. She goes, but you will win your case. I wouldn't be doing this and telling the whole world about my stuff if I know I didn't have the evidence. But my social justice is dimming the gaslight. That is my mission statement. Is I remember that guy who was laying in bed 3 o'clock in the morning, staring at the ceiling. Her back is turned to me, sleeping completely soundly. We just had a horrible fight and she's completely unfazed. And I'm just staring at the ceiling going, what am I going to do? And I empathize too with people who go, like, I talk to people who are still in the relationship. And I used to think, like, where am I going to go on Christmas? I don't have a lot of family. Or, how am I going to, wake up on a holiday and not see my kids open Christmas presents and stuff. Right. But you got to understand, you will die if you stay in this situation. You will not make it. Your sanity will be gone. I'm by the New York area, man. I look at some of these people that are on the street screaming and yelling to themselves. And I always think, like, by the grace of God, there go I. Like, I could be, if I stayed in that relationship, I would be walking the streets, howling at the moon, crazy as a loon.
Leaving's definitely the best thing by far. There's just other issues that come up once you leave, but they're better than the alternative.
The alternative is literally suicide. I mean, like, suicide in the mental psychological sense and maybe in the physical sense, but it's like your mental health, and I'm a big advocate for mental health, your mental health will exponentially suffer if you stay in a situation as abusive as what I stayed in. And I love how you just said, like, it gets harder. Don't let anybody tell you it gets easier when you leave. It gets fucking harder. I mean, you have to create a completely new identity. And I've spoken about this, a lot of my podcasts and some other interviews that I've done, is just like, you forget who you are when you're in that relationship. You forget what you enjoy because you were stifled for so long. So when you get out, a large part of it is just like, find out who you are. What do you like? And like, do that shit. Because there were so many, like, for example, with me, I told this story on another podcast. I absolutely love Tom Petty. I'm big into music. And I love Tom Petty. And I told my next, I was like, I really want to go to a Tom Petty show. And Tom Petty was coming to New Jersey. And she said, well, we can't go because my brother is having a baby. And what if he has a baby on that date? And I'm like, in that 3-hour window? And so long story short, I missed Tom Petty. And 2 weeks later, Tom Petty died. Tom Petty died, man. So that my point is like, I'm a big foodie. I go around New York and I go to different food places. I go to concerts and I go to ball games and like whatever it may be, hang out, reconnect with some of those people that you lost in your relationship. Shout out to my family. I mean, you can listen to my podcast, but I had a huge, huge fallout with my mother and my mother's side of the family. And I have an older sister that I didn't speak to for 12 years because she had a fallout with my next. It's really about getting back to what makes you, what makes you tick, and know that that narcissist had no value in your life. They were dead weight that you were carrying around. Right. And it's time to get back to you.
Now, I guess this is a good time to bring up the challenges that a man has and the perception of the man being the victim of abuse, where there are a lot of people that they struggle with that. And even within our community of people who talk about narcissism, etc., there's some people that have a hard time with it. They have a really hard time with seeing the man's side because they automatically want to give that woman the benefit of the doubt because they have that in their minds a little bit. And you see that a little bit. You made that post before with like Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, and it caused a little bit of a firestorm there, which I was surprised about at first. And then I realized, no, I shouldn't be surprised about this. This is real. So perhaps you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I made a post. Whoever's listening to this, wherever you stand, I made a mention earlier in, our interview today that I stand with all men and I stand with all women. Far be it for me to divide anybody, right? I take all of these situations, all these people that reach out to me, these things that I see in the public sphere and stuff. My brain is always wired to take things on a subjective basis. And when you mentioned that Johnny Depp and Amber Heard thing, so I went back on YouTube and I watched the entire trial because when it was actually going on was just weeks of me being evicted from my home. And I knew about it, but I didn't really internalize it the way I wanted to. And then, so I went back about a month or two ago and I watched on YouTube, there's a playlist of the entire trial. And the way my brain works is, do I see Johnny Depp as a flawless human being? Fuck no, for sure no. Do I see him as an addict? Most likely. Do I see that he has anger issues? Yes. But I saw, and the jury saw, that he was more credible than Amber Heard. What really stuck out to me is when she was on the stand and they played a recording and she says, I wasn't punching you, I was hitting you. And for me, that is when I said, okay. And so I made that post on Instagram and it was polarizing. But going back to my 4 quarters and 100 pennies, I had a lot of people saying, unfollowing you. And I said, okay, bye. Man, listen, I'm not here for any fame. I'm not here for any recognition. I'm here to hold the hand of the guy or the girl who's walking down that path and they're in the same dark tunnel I was at. And all I can say is, listen, I'm going to go back into that tunnel and I'm going to hold your hand and I'm going to try and get you back to the light because I was in the darkness for so long and I know what the light feels like, even though I do go back into that tunnel a lot. I know what it feels, and we have to walk together. I will not divide anybody.
Right. I think that's the best way to look at it too.
Yeah. So, but when it comes to the Amber Heard, so men, when it comes to false allegations on men, again, I'm a big dude. My stature is much bigger than my neck's. And not for nothing, there are a lot of shitty men out there. There are a lot of fucking pieces of shit men that shouldn't be on this fucking planet, to be completely honest. And unfortunately, myself, I have to pay for their mistakes, and I get it. One thing that this whole lesson this whole thing has taught me is patience. And maybe people who are listening to this in my close inner circle wouldn't necessarily agree that I'm patient, but I'm far more patient than I ever was, because I know I'm going to win. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I don't care if my kids are 15 years old. The truth will set everyone free. And I have faith in that. My faith dies last.
Right. I think it's just super important to take every situation individually for that reason, because like you said, there are a lot of garbage dudes out there. I hear about them all the time from my female clients, and I'm blown away by all the things they can get away with. But I've also heard stories like yours where it's the woman who's being wild and is completely out of control. So I try to take them all individually and break it down like that. Gender
shouldn't influence guilt, in my opinion, right? Like, you're a man, you're automatically guilty. You're a woman, you're automatically innocent. Like, it shouldn't be like that. Everything, and not just in narcissism, but I mean, this is Mac's fucking, thoughts on the world, but everything needs to be taken on a subjective basis.
Definitely.
Everything needs to be taken on a subjective basis. Do your research, hear both sides of the coin. Fuck, man, I would love for my next to actually come on my podcast and have her give her point of view. Go right the hell ahead, man.
I've invited mine before, back in the day.
Man. I mean, listen, let's do a public trial, right? I'm willing to stake my reputation on it.
Mine got all upset at me, and she was like, really? Because she read my book where I had a little blurb about her, and she demanded I go back and change my book because she said what I said was wrong. And I was like, imagine, I didn't even mention her by name or anything, but she cares that much about it that she wants me to change the book.
So it's funny. My next, I don't think she's listening to the podcast. I think she's hiring lawyers and paralegals to listen to the podcast, which is stupid on her point, because I think, she's spending a lot of money on that. But she made a comment in our Family Wizard the other day of like, you hide behind this silly little podcast. And so again, I never show my face, but I made a post on Instagram and it said hashtag silly little podcast on the end. Because, like I said, I'll stake my reputation on what I'm saying. I don't know why I do know why. I have an aversion to lying. That doesn't mean I don't, lie from time to time, but we all lie in some degree.
Gregory House agrees.
Yeah, we all lie in some degree, but my lies, I don't know. At the end of the day, everything I've said on the podcast in terms of the situations that I go through, they're all, it's funny, I have a disclaimer at the end of the podcast. It's based upon a true story, because the names, locations, and things like that have changed. But what I live is completely honestly true. And it's cool because it's almost like a diary. You know what I mean? I'm telling my diary, I'm opening my diary and reading it to all of you. And, the most I can do is hope that this gets you closer out of that tunnel and into the light.
Right. And it's interesting to note how she was belittling your podcast, calling it, oh, your silly little podcast. And they would love to make you look as bad as possible and smear you in that way. So It's not surprising that she did that.
Dude, it's funny when it comes to your book and stuff. Like if I were you, if I was in your position, all I would have been like, she would have said whatever she would have said. And I would have sent back 3 words. Thanks for reading.
That is good.
Thanks for reading.
Thanks for the attention. Thanks for reading. Thank you.
Going back to it, right? Like I say my interaction now with my next should be a lot like Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it now. It should be a lot like that was back in the day, like 140 characters or less. Like it's brevity, but like getting the point across. So she said that shit about your book and she wants you to change things. I just go back and write, thanks for reading, and just send it and not read whatever response she has for that. Because that's going to be triggering as fuck.
And that's also, it's like a gray rock there too, even though it's kind of not in that context, but from the outside, gray rock. Thanks for reading. That's all. Simple.
Thanks for reading. Yep.
Now, here's another question I have for you. How is the relationship with your kids held up through all of this smear campaign and all the things they're whispering in their ear? How do you handle that side of it, like cultivating and keeping the relationship with them?
So my kids, they love me. And I'm trying to think of how to briefly tell this story. So my most recent episode of the podcast is I pick my children up at the Pleasantville police station where I mentioned my next lives. And when they get out of the car, they scream and they cry and they don't want to come with me. And the reason that they don't want to come with me is because they have a house, they have a bedroom, they have toys, they have food, they have all their things that check all their boxes with their mom. And their mom is their mom, right? Like, I don't want them to hate their mom. You have one mom and one dad for the rest of your life. But what we don't see, and this is what I said to the police officers when I was having them try and help and facilitate my parental court ordered time, is we don't see behind the scenes. So she gets, before they get in the car, she's like, I can only, pontificate, but I'm sure she's sitting there going, oh, it's going to be okay. And I'm only a call away, and keep each other safe. My kids, do they know about the alleged strangling or anything like that? I doubt it. It's funny. So during the first restraining order, at the time, I don't have that job anymore, but I was in pharmaceutical sales. And my nex told my kids, it was, during the time of the coronavirus vaccines being manufactured. And she had told the kids, because I was in pharma sales, that I was working with doctors to sell coronavirus vaccines. And because I was around people with coronavirus is why I couldn't come home for those 42 days. And I'm glad I just got that out, because it's really hard for me to say that, because it's such a lie. And I always get choked up when I say that, because I remember the story that she told, but I remember the life that I was living at that time. And man, it was the darkest time of my life. But they don't necessarily know the smear campaigns. I remember after I logged into court for, under Dimming the Gaslight, my son came to me a couple of days later when he had the overnight stay with me. And he goes, "Dad, do you know about podcasts?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know about podcasts. What do you know about podcasts?" And he's like, "Oh, they're just like radio or something." I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Do you do a podcast?" And I was like, I have." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And he just went on playing his Roblox. I don't know what, I can only guess what she says, while she's on the phone in the kitchen in her house and the kids are in earshot. But I don't think, I'd like to think she's not telling them that I abused her and stuff, because she knows it's not true. I wouldn't put anything past her. She's diabolical. So
Anything's possible. And
yeah.
I mean, like you said, they love to tell fantastical stories about it too. So the story she made up of you selling coronavirus vaccines, it's like they couldn't just tell like a simple lie. Like, no, they have to tell a story and really spin a yarn, for lack of a better word, with it.
It was such a complicated situation. How are you going to say that daddy just disappeared one day? And daddy, the day I disappeared in the morning, like I said, my kids are all into nostalgia stuff. And at the time I was living in the house, we were all into Ghostbusters. And I took a video of us with the Ghostbusters backpack on and the meter hunting for ghosts and stuff. And all of a sudden, it's gone. Like, daddy's just gone. So what the hell happened?
Yeah, it's wild that they would even go that far with it. But like you said, nothing would surprise me. So she might be saying to them all sorts of things. But then I think the thing would then be to not let it bother you at all, which of course is the hardest thing, right? If the kids see you getting emotional, upset about it, it'll almost give credence to what the mother is saying. Yeah. But that's why I like the gray rock, jade, no emotional reactions, and just like water off the duck's back with it. Right. While it's the hardest thing to do, I think it's like essential to do.
Yeah, I'm with you. Hey, this is kind of out of my wheelhouse, but I just saw a pop-up from Marissa B, who said that WhatsApp and Signal, I'm not familiar with Signal, but WhatsApp doesn't delete your messages. That's good to know. Thanks for that, Marissa.
I put that. That's why I put it up there, because I thought other people might. I'll put it back again. Yes, and Marissa B said, WhatsApp and Signal don't delete your text. Telegram probably doesn't as well. And you can easily search words to find those messages and star specific ones, voice and text, to find again. So I think that's pretty important for anyone who's in a situation like yours. Keep this information in mind here.
Yeah, Marissa, thanks for that. And, Marissa just touched on something very important too. It's one thing to have all your evidence. It's another thing to stay organized. So I like how she just said that you have to star certain things. My lawyer says, like, the way I organize things is, you know, I organize by date and time and labeling, and you just got to be able to almost create your own library so you can be like, hey, I'm going to go back and I can access XYZ at any time, you know, add the context of what happened, you know, when you're labeling stuff like that. So yeah, Marissa, thank you so much for that comment.
Yeah, I used to work in the addiction field, and they have the same advice there, where we would work with like teens that would be, they would go to this place instead of jail. And the managers there, I'll tell you what, a lot of the employees in a place like that, they're just as wild, it seems, as some of the kids that are staying there. But the advice they would give is you got to document everything, like you were saying. And it applies to situations like yours, and it also applies to a lot of workplaces as well. But document everything. You got to have all that evidence lined up and ready to go just in case. The CYA, right? Cover your ass.
CYA is such a big deal. Cover your ass if you don't know. But like, that's the thing. And like, I'm glad you just said that. Like, when it comes to like work environments, dude, I have a friend who is physically challenged, and he was going to be fired from his job. And they called him into the office, and he recorded the firing. And it was basically discriminatory. And he was able to get his unemployment and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, you can record in any setting legally. You can. So, I mean, in New Jersey, you can. So,
Utah too, according to one of the chatters here.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, man, it's like, it's really knowing your rights, knowing your laws. It's another thing. So I've recently come across, there's a great website on YouTube and on TikTok and stuff, and it's called Long Island Audit. And I want to get this guy on my podcast to talk, but he talks a lot about his constitutional rights. And some people might look at it and think he's like challenging police and stuff like that. But listen, subjectively, going back to the word subjectively, there's a lot of good people out there. There's a lot of bad people out there. There's a lot of good cops out there. There's a lot of bad cops out there. So I've learned a lot about my constitutional rights, my civil rights. I'm a big fan of, the 1A Constitution, and I just want to make sure that my freedom of speech is protected. And, I'm very versed on whether or not I'm committing a crime. I can't really give any legal advice, but I've become pretty versed on, my rights, because they have been so violated when I haven't been paying attention. That's for sure.
Right. Well, knowledge is power, baby.
Yes,
knowledge is power.
Yes, sir.
Now, ideally for you, what is like success moving forward for you? What is the pinnacle? What does victory look like?
Personally or socially?
Both.
Okay. Well, personally is, so my next is totally spunny yarn with all these false allegations. And personally speaking, I would like to dismantle the narrative. And the only way I can see that happening is by the slam of a gavel. And again, I don't think it's going to be as grandiose as probably I want, but I want justice and I want my peace back. I want the freedom to be the father that I am without being judged by someone who can't judge me on parental ability. I mean, what kind of mother eliminates a child's father on false allegations and you still want to claim that you're a good mother? Like, that's just, I can't wrap my brain around it. And a long time ago, I made a deal with myself to stop trying to make sense of the nonsensical. So I can't make any heads or tails of that, but personal success would be to dismantle the story and get divorced in a way that it doesn't have any loopholes in it. So that's my personal success. As far as, dimming the gaslight and the future of that, so just recently I launched a merch store just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the merch store is doing really good. There's certain things that I want to do with this platform because I never necessarily, fame is not on my radar. That's not why I'm doing this. It's just, I have this instilled empathy in me where I know what it was like to be that guy catatonic on the floor, throwing up, you know, the room is spinning, or I'd be walking literally like 13 miles a day, just trying to get to sundown, right? Or just trying to make it another hour. And I'm farther along than I was at that point, although I do battle depression and things like that. But, you know, success for Dimming the Gaslight is to continue helping people get out of that tunnel, that tunnel, so to speak. And I'm very blessed with really great people around me. Like, you know, I'm dating somebody right now, and she helped me, you know, create logos and set up a merch store. So you can go to dimmingthegaslight.myshopify.com to check out the Dimming the Gaslight merch. I have an app that's in the works. I have like a network of legal counsel and mental health experts that I want to launch soon. There's all these little things that I just think this narcissism sphere is bigger than I ever anticipated. And I'm getting DMs and questions every day of how do I do this and how do I do that? And I do my best to answer all those things. But, you know, we all got to trudge this path together. And that's all I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to bridge that gap between where you may be now in your healing journey of just being completely fucking lost, to getting to the end of narcissism journey and moving on with your life, right? Like I just said, I'm dating somebody now, and it's going tremendously well. And shout out to her in case she's listening, but I know she's at work. But like, that's the thing, is like, you just try and get to a better place than where you were at, you know, because we all remember those early days, and they were insufferable. I don't even know how I got through it. I really don't.
I hear you. Now, ideally, would you get 50-50 custody of your kids when it's all said and done, or what are you shooting for in that realm?
It's funny, right? So like, I sit around and I go, well, like I said, how good of a mother could she be if she, you know, disassociated my kids from me? You know, she can't care about the kids if she would go and make these false allegations separate me. So to get 50-50, yeah, I mean, that's ultimately what's going to happen. I have this diluted fantasy that, like, you know, I want to get full custody of the kids, but not for nothing, man. Like, so I've lived, in the last 2 years, I've lived a pretty cool life, getting back to knowing who I am. And there's things that I enjoy that, like, I can't even imagine having full custody of the kids. I don't think I could handle it, because I do like my personal life.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, 50-50 is the goal, with the caveat of her lies being exposed, you know, because I feel like that's kind of the door hinge between her future of accusing me of anything else, accusing me of treating the kids poorly or whatever. That's kind of like where that hinges, is that if I expose her lies, she can't really do that anymore, especially if it's recognized by the court.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's a good thing to strive for. And full custody, like you said, that would be tough. I don't know how single parents do it, period. How do they have full custody and then still live life, have a job, have a social life, all that good stuff? It's a lot.
Yeah. And shout out, in this day and age. Shout out to you guys that are doing it, you know? Yeah. Like, fuck, man. Like, you know, and I tell people too, like, you know, especially women, right? Like, if some guy left you or something like that, count that shit as a blessing, man. Like, yes, you want somebody to raise your kids with you, but you know, you are a badass mom who can take care of your kids. You're doing it. No one said it was easy, but everybody told you it would be worth it, and it will be worth it. And your kids will respect you when they get older, knowing that, you know, mom busted her ass to make sure that I was all right, and I wanted for nothing. So I'm proud of, especially you women out there. I'm really, really proud of you guys for what I see some of you doing. And yeah, keep up the good work.
Right. And I wanted to mention this part too. I think one of the things that I see people struggle with a lot, and I see a lot of women struggle with this as well, is avoiding the Hoover attempts by the narcissist, right? And a lot of them in the beginning, they're not able to get that initial separation where the trauma bond can start to dissipate a little bit, but they keep on getting sucked back. And that changes, right? It changes depending on each individual situation, what it is that's sucking them back. But did that ever happen to you too, where she was trying to Hoover you back in?
Yeah, like I was hoovered within the relationship. Like, so early on when we were dating, I took her to this beautiful trip for her birthday to Maine. And we did like horseback riding, and we had dinner, like this lobster ratatouille on George Bush Senior's compound in Maine. It was beautiful. It was something out of like The Notebook or something, right? So like on my last final days being in the house, I have a recording of her going, and she had already made up her mind that she was going to do these false allegations, but I have a recording of her going, maybe we should take the kids to Maine for Christmas. And I go, you were just telling me I was an asshole 4 hours ago. You know what I mean? I really think with the Hoover, I saw a great analogy the other day on social media, and it was a mom talking to her daughter, and she goes, listen, if you keep your hand on the fire, you're going to get burned. If you take your hand off of the fire, it's still going to hurt, but it's not going to persist like it will if you keep your hand on the fire. So if you're versed in narcissism and you know what's being done to you, they're not going to change. It's less than a needle in a haystack who are self-aware enough to make any progress in this disorder. So I really think, please take your hand off the fire. There's nothing worse than, I will admit, I had people who reach out to me and say, we got back together, and I don't want to say I lose respect for him, but it's kind of like, well, I'll see you in the tunnel a little later down the line. You know what I mean? That's it.
Well, I mean, I would say if someone truly wants to leave, their actions got to show it. And if your actions show it, it means, you block them on everything if you're not co-parenting with them, and you stay away, right? You don't leave any channels of communication open. If you're serious, that's what you do. Now, if you're co-parenting, of course, you can't do that. And then the other thing I would say is I tell everybody, because I know about the self-aware narcissist community as well, but I always tell everybody, focus on the behaviors much more so than the labels. The behaviors will tell the tale. So regardless of what you call it, if someone's acting a certain way, and behaviors of gaslighting, flipping the script, smear campaigns, belittling, gaslighting, all that good stuff, that's a problem, regardless of what you call it. So I say focus on those behaviors. That will tell the real story.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And taking it one step farther, it's like, sorry is not a word. Sorry is an action. So remorse is an action. Sorry means that you don't do it again, right? And it's funny because I never really got a genuine apology from my next, but I have friends who are in Alcoholics Anonymous. And Alcoholics Anonymous teaches people to apologize by telling the person what you did, ask them what hold on. I got to make sure I get this right. You tell them what you did. You ask them what you did, and then you ask how you can make it better. Right. And that's how Alcoholics Anonymous teaches people to make amends to people.
Great apology.
Yeah. So that's how you do it. So if you're not getting that from the narcissist because, I'm sorry that I did this, but you did X, Y, Z, that's not a fucking apology. And that's not going to come with reformative action. So there's got to be some sort of action, or else the apology is empty.
Right. The only real apology is changed behavior. Right. And so the way they say that is, and I like how AA does it. And what you said earlier about by the grace of God, there go I think that's an AA thing too. But like they would say, you ask them, hey, what did you perceive my actions to be? I'll tell you what I think they were. And I'm going to try to do my best to change my behavior in the future. It shows a lot of humility when you do that. And that applies to anybody, right? It doesn't just apply to narcissistic relationships, or it applies to anyone that wants to make amends. And the humility part, I think, is where a lot of people screw up. They're not able to say, yeah, this is what I did wrong, without doing the but you did this. But totally. I was the victim, or but this.
Right. And that's the thing too, is like, and that's how I know that I'm not the narcissist, even though we all question all the time, are we the narcissist? But like self-reflection for me, like, what did I do? Like, how did I offend this person? And obviously it's never my intention to offend anybody, but, there's certain situations where, I run my mouth and I might say too much that I, really didn't think before it came past my teeth. And self-reflection for us, right? Because it's not about, to me, forgiveness is, I will never be able to forgive my narc. And I know a lot of people be like, oh, forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. You're right. I can't forgive them, but I can forgive me for pushing my way through those red flags when I saw them. I just fucking ignored them, you know? And I've the forgiveness and the amends that I've made to myself is I won't do it ever again. And that's the action. Right? Like if I see the red flags, I tell people all the time, especially now with the dating game, and I'm no expert in the dating game, but I tell people, you look for red flags, right? If something comes up and you see that, right? That's one thing. But then you look for a pattern, and patterns are what matter to me. I can see a red flag, I can observe it, and I can be like, maybe an isolated incident. But then I can also say, oh, well, now this is becoming a pattern, and this isn't what I want to live in my life, and be strong enough to move on, you know, because there's not everything going to be bad about that, especially in, you know, if it's a romantic relationship. You might break up with somebody that you still care about, right. But there's certain things that you might look at and say, I don't know if I can tolerate this.
Well, it's like I say too, that anyone can have a bad day, and everyone has like defects and shortcomings, etc. But the patterns of those are the things to watch out for, like you said, and getting to the bottom of them, like having that conflict and that fight in the beginning, or conflict resolution, I should say. You get to the bottom of that instead of just brushing it under the rug. Because if you brush it under the rug, you know, months to years can go by, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
But you get to the bottom of those red flags in the beginning, you can save yourself a lot of trouble. And that's kind of what I was thinking when I was listening to your podcast too. I was like, yeah, I see some of these here. Like if he could have got to the bottom of that there, could have chopped off some of this stuff with the legs.
Right. But you also see how I just said, fuck, like, what am I going to do? Like, there's no alternative, you know, like a good example is, you know, so quick backstory, my kids, my next was obsessed with her mother, and my next's mother was present at birth of both of my kids. And I was already having the kids. What was I supposed to do? You know, like, was I supposed to just walk away? We went to therapy about it. I mean, there's all these things that are big life situations, but I could have nipped that in the bud before I ever got to that point.
And I think just having someone that's on your team, like, and this goes for any relationship where you're on the same team and you have the same goals.
It's not about being right? It's about coming to a common understanding that, you know, benefits both of you. You know what I mean? Like, and it just strengthens your relationship. It's funny. It's really cool that two guys are sitting here doing this, right? Because this is usually like the dating advice you hear from a Dear Abby article.
Right. But it's so true though. Like it seems like when you're on the same team with someone, you don't care as much about who's right. You care. It's like the difference between an argument and a discussion. The argument is to find out who is right. A discussion is to find out what is right. It's like that, where unfortunately, a lot of times someone's committed to giving the other person a bad interpretation or a not charitable interpretation. That happens a lot. Or they can't admit they're wrong and they got to make sure it's just the other person's fault. Those are the kind of relationships that have a faulty foundation and they're just not going to fly. But if two people can be fairly emotionally mature, admit when they're wrong, place boundaries, etc., and be on the same team, that's really all it takes. That's like the bedrock of a successful relationship right there.
Yeah. I could not have said it better myself. I mean, you just hit all those points. It's about coming to a common understanding, knowing that this is a relationship. It's kind of like a symbiotic thing where we both want to, you know, make it work. So, that's how it should work. You want to read this question up here?
Sure. So in this case, Elisa Joseph says, so in this case, if I were you, I wouldn't feel it's in my child's best interest to be with the other parent. An automatic 50% of the time. Narcissism can be passed down by overexposure. That's a good point.
It's a great point. It's a great point. And, you know, obviously I've considered that, Alicia. I've considered that. And, you know, this is, I'm not above selfishness. I'm not above it. Like I care deeply about my kids, but I've also now in the last 2 years created this life that, you know, I want to live. You know, I am busy too when my kids aren't around, and I have real life stuff, not just this podcast, but I work, you know? So like, it's hard to your point about passing it down. Narcissism is completely true. Like I see my kids lie now. And like, I talked about it in my last episode of my podcast, is like, my son will be like, oh, my sister hit me, or my daughter will be like, my brother hit me. And I'm like, no, that didn't happen. I was right there. You know what I mean? And it's a weird fine line between, is this narcissism or is this just kids tattletaling? You know what I mean? That's just one example.
That is a tough one.
It's a tough one, right? And
because kids are narcissistic by nature, right? So it's hard to determine.
I don't want to say my kids are narcissistic, but they're selfish. Kids should be selfish.
Right. Well, that's what they'll say, right? Kids, they have this a narcissism about all kids have this in the beginning. What happens is some of them, most of them, grow out of it. But maybe I would argue less and less do grow out of it these days. But that's like kind of the progression.
So check this out. So a couple of weeks ago, I had my kids at the playground, and a kid fell on the playground and was crying. And the kid was playing with my son. And I thought this was a good learning opportunity. So I went over to my son and I said, the kid fell and skinned up his knees real bad. And I was like, oh, what happened to that kid? And he goes, oh, he tripped. He skinned his knees. I was like, oh, it's got to hurt. And he's like, yeah. He just kept on playing. I go, have you ever fell and skinned your knees? And he's like, yeah. I was like, did you cry? He goes, yeah. I go, then I guess you know what that kid's going through, right? And he goes, yeah. I was like, I feel bad for him. And my son goes, yeah, me too. And I was like, boom, that's all I wanted to hear. That's all I want to hear. Boom, me too. That's what I was trying to get him to say, is right. Because, and maybe he was just following my lead, but you can teach kids empathy. You can teach kids empathy, especially when your narcissist doesn't. Because my narcissist has no empathy, but yeah, you can teach them. There's another situation. So, right when I got out of my home, I had to go to a food bank to get my food because, I'm spending something like $1,300 a month more than what I make. So I started going to a food bank to get my food. And I have this ambition to take my kids to the food bank to kind of like give back our time to teach them empathy. And I don't have to sit there and go, hey, daddy went to a food bank, so now we're at a food bank, giving out food. But we can teach people, or we can teach our children that there's less fortunate people out there who might not have the same advantages that we have when we're comfortable.
Right. Now, here's a question. I don't know the answers to this, but I don't think anyone's lost their kids because of a personality disorder diagnosis without there also being some form of abuse.
Right.
Do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything about that offhand. And that's kind of why, like, going back to my lawyer kind of puts me in place and checks me.
Because the commenter there, Alicia, that is a good point. I just don't think it's enforceable. I don't think they would take kids just from a diagnosis.
Right. No, definitely not. I mean, that's like saying like a person who's bipolar can't have their kids. Right. Of course not. But the fucking thing that pisses me off so much, man, is that like the legal system, at least in my eyes, only recognizes physical abuse, and they don't recognize emotional, psychological. They don't recognize that shit. And like, that's kind of my thing, is that like I'm sitting here going, how much could a mother love their kids if she made an end run at divorce to remove their father from their kids that they love? There's no evidence of whatsoever of like any police reports or anything she's ever alleged prior to evicting me from my house that my kids weren't in good hands. It's everything. She tries to make a paper trail post separation. So to answer your question, no one's going to be taken away from their kids strictly off of a diagnosis. That's like saying, oh, anybody with any kind of diagnosis can't be a parent. But there's a point that I'm trying to make within the court system. And I don't want to divulge too much because my next might be listening to this, and I don't want to give away my strategies, but yeah, that's an excellent point.
Well, I think you did a good thing there with your son, trying to teach him the empathy of, hey, put yourself in that kid's scenario that just skinned his knee there, and think about how that might feel for you. Because I think that is the antidote, right? If a parent is going to be passing down narcissistic traits, and we do become like the people we surround ourselves with, so that's not like coming out of right field there. There is some truth in that. Yeah. So being the antidote of it, I think, would be the best way to go. Like, showing them some empathy. And if you see lies, call out lies in a friendly, nice way. Like, hey, why are you lying? What's your motivation behind lying? Why do you feel the need to lie? And just open up the dialogue about it.
It's all, and like you said, a lot of kids are narcissistic, and I just think they're selfish and they're kids being kids.
Sure.
So, but like, I think like, my son will lie. And like, when he gets out of the car and he's crying and stuff, I think he thinks like, again, he has his house, he has his home, he has his toys, he has his food, all that kind of stuff. And I think he admitted to me, the more he cries, he thinks that the police are going to enforce that he doesn't have to go with me because he's putting on a show. And he admitted that to me. And I have
manipulation.
Yeah, and it's a manipulative behavior. But the thing is too, is that as a father, I'm not afraid of being the disciplinarian because I know that she's not. So I can call him out on his bullshit because like his little 7-year-old mind is not enough to manipulate me. It might be enough to manipulate a cop or his mom or something that doesn't have the full picture. But I know when you come to my house and we're playing Roblox and you're eating mega stuffed Oreos, you're happy as can be. But
absolutely,
you know what I mean? So I have the full picture of everything. So
yeah, so we have a couple other statements here that some of the commenters are saying. So Ali says kids are gaslit constantly by the nexus, told their feelings aren't valid, reality's rewritten. That's the issue of overexposure as well. Yes, focusing on empathy is key, and boundaries / rules. I agree.
Yeah, Ali, dynamite comment. Like that's what it's all about, is like, we did not have boundaries. We did not have rules when we were in that relationship. So you have to institute your boundaries now. And like, the narcissist is going to challenge those boundaries. So like, if they get overstepped, you have to have an accordant response to those boundaries being overstepped. I'm only speaking for myself. I'm only speaking for, like, far be it for me to tell anybody what to do, but that's me, is that I institute my boundaries. If they're crossed, I mean, I deal with it in a subjective manner. Maybe that's just ignoring the response that I get from my next. I mean, I never know. It depends on what situation I'm in. But and here's another great point, to piggyback off of what you said, Ali. Nobody has to know your boundaries. Nobody has to know your boundaries. You don't have to tell people what your boundaries are. You don't have to say, if you do X, I will do Y. Fuck no. You don't have to tell anybody that. If somebody doesn't know that they're overstepping your boundaries, they're not somebody that needs to be convinced of it in the first place. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I get it. I think that does depend on what the boundary would be, I think. But I guess it depends on the situation, whether I would think about that. Now, I think the best antidote, like Ali is also saying here, is just open lines of communication. If you have open lines of communication with your kids where you say, hey, you can tell me anything, like, and I'm not going to jump down your throat, because when I was growing up, that's kind of how it was for me. I felt if I was honest, I'd get in trouble, and I would get in trouble. It was like everything seemed conditional. So just having those open lines where they feel comfortable being honest with you, I think that's one of the biggest things, that if you keep that open, things can only go so poorly. But once those honest lines of communication go, then things can really go off the rails.
Right. Dude, I heard this great story on social media someplace about these parents who they had teenagers, and the teenagers were like, oh, I love Carol Ann. Hi, Carol Ann. I see your comment on the screen. Real quick, I just want to tell the story. So the parents had teenagers, and, the teenagers were experimenting with being teenagers, and they created this rule that if the kid is at, like, say, a party or something and they feel uncomfortable, they can call the parents and literally like use like a code word, or just say like, listen, I feel uncomfortable, come pick me up. No questions asked. Right. Like, it's not like the parent's going to sit there and be like, are you doing drugs? What are you drinking? But it's like, dude, the kid is being responsible enough to tell you they want to get out of the situation, that they shouldn't have consequences for that, So that's going back to what I believe it was Ali who said, it's open lines of communication, right? Open lines of communication. Listen, I'll be responsible for you. You respect me, and we'll take it from there.
1000%. So Carol Ann says this is the one weapon narcs love to use: control the kids by keeping them away from the good parent. It's truly vile, and the harm is irreparable.
It is. And it's hard. And like I said, this podcast has become a diary. It's become a diary for me to tell what they're doing and how I'm coping with it, and hoping that people can relate. And seems like you guys are. And you know, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. We're not perfect. We're not hovering over everybody else just because we know about narcissism. We're works in progress, and we're trying to get to a point where somebody who is committed to causing chaos and how we operate within that chaos. So yeah, they turn the kids against you. And I gave that scenario earlier on about how I took away football, and that's the only thing I could think of. There's consequences for your actions, and don't use the word punishment. Use the word consequences. Punishment sounds too, I don't know, the semantics of it sound too severe, but use consequences. There's consequences. If you do X, I do Y. I'm not just going to go around penalizing people and hurting people, but I will not allow people to overstep my boundaries.
Sure. And I think you doing this podcast and running that Instagram page, probably great therapy, great getting things off your chest for you. And I think that is priceless as well.
Oh, totally. I mean, like, it's funny. So like in the early days, I used to have friends, and man, I had this one friend, and he's been on my podcast. He's my best friend named Mo, and Mo and I used to stay on the phone until like 5 a.m. And like, he'd be like, bro, I got to go to bed. And I'd be like, you got to understand, I was in the thick of it. I was in the real thick of it. And, yeah, it's gotten to a point where I kind of lost my train of thought, but it's gotten to a point where with this podcast, that was my point, is that like, I've gotten to a point where like, I can just get on the mic and say, hey, this is what's going on. This is, the bookmark in the timeline of this whole thing. And then I invite other people on too, for kind of that cathartic outlet of, getting it out. And a lot of people, it's funny, early on in my recording, I don't know if you get this, but I always feel exhausted after I record because it's such a purge. You know what I'm saying? It's such a purge to get all this shit out. And a lot of people that I've interviewed have said the same thing. Like, I got to go out and take a nap, man.
Now, I get that from two sides, right? Because just being so social for a while, as like, I'm kind of an outgoing introvert. So lots of social interaction can be exhausting for me. So the double whammy of that, plus just getting all that stuff out and talking about something real, the double effect of that can be pretty powerful.
You get me, man. You get me.
Yeah. So I guess to wrap things up here, besides the documenting of everything and everything, what would be your suggestions again to the people who are experiencing parental alienation, kids being weaponized against them? What are your emotional recommendations to them just to help them mentally?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so we covered the legal aspect of everything is to document. Emotionally, what you can do for yourself is, I always think the first step is education, because narcissism, especially because it's such like an overblown word now, people roll their eyes at you when you say, oh, my next is a narcissist. Yeah, everybody's next is a narcissist. But now I sit here and I think education is so important, because so the very first episode I ever did of the podcast was called The Ingredients to a Narcissist Recipe. And it was like, when I discovered trauma bonds and love bombing and hoovering, and I was like, fuck, there's a word for all this shit. I mean, I truly thought I was the only person in the world who experienced this stuff. And I'm like, oh, wait, at the time it was 2022. And I'm like, oh, there's a word for all this stuff. So education is of the most paramount importance. And then, you're going to have to, in most cases, if you're married or have kids, luckily I envy the people who can have a clean breakup and not be married and never talk to them again. But, you have to find ways to cope with that. And, again, it's on a subjective basis. It's about what you can tolerate and what you can stomach in order to deal with their bullshit. But, forgive yourself. To your education is forgive yourself. Find ways to forgive yourself. Me, was such a big deal. Being out in nature and sounds so fucking cheesy, man. It sounds so cheesy, but I know that there were just certain things that I did for me that I didn't. You're allowed to be selfish. You went through abuse. So once you come to grips with it, it's really about forgiving yourself for allowing being abused, and then kind of taking care of yourself. I always think like the taking care of your inner child thing is a little lame, although I get it. But like, it's like you really have to heal. You have to heal the same way, like, you know, going back to the skin knee analogy. It takes time. It's not overnight, and it's not linear either. So sometimes you take 2 steps forward, you take 3 steps back, and you're like, fuck, I'm regressing. You're not. This is going to take time. And navigating this whole thing is a journey, and the ultimate destination is healing. So yeah, I think education, I think healing, and I want to get to a point too where, don't get me wrong, I made the analogy before, like I want to go back into the tunnel and hold somebody's hands and walk with them into the light. But also for the same token, like, is this my identity? Do I want to be the narcissistic guy forever? Or do I want to live a new life, you know? And I don't know the answer to that. I took a break from the podcast early on for like a month to really reflect on that. And is this who I am? And there's nothing wrong with that. If this is who I am and this is the new identity I've created, so be it. I mean, I'm having fun doing this, you know? So it's really taking care of yourself, setting new goals, finding out who you are, and you can't go around it. You got to get through it. And I'm not through it. I'm not through it. But I've taken some really cool steps on the way on that journey.
Sure. And I tell people that to not beat themselves up about it, for one, that no act of self-love or improvement is too small. I think that's important to remember too. Those little things will absolutely add up. And then you make a good point there about just making content about this topic in general. I forget that there's still a lot of people out there that don't have the awareness, that don't have the education. So they'll come find me, or they'll come find you, and they'll be like, oh my goodness, you're putting into words what I've been dealing with for this many years, and I had no idea what it was. So there's still a lot of people that they need stuff like this.
And maybe you can relate to this. I mean, this is the interviewer and me turning it on you. But do you feel like so my standpoint is, I don't want to get to a point where it's like, hey, I've made it through and it's up to you guys to figure it out for yourself, right? I want to be here for that new guy or girl who's in pain and reaches out to me at 3:00 in the morning. And I'm like, fuck, I was there at one point, so I'll stay awake and I'll talk to you. Do you feel that way too? Like, so I don't want, it's weird. I'm conflicted almost in a way.
Well, you know what I do to kind of counteract that? I talk about radical self-respect, and I think radical self-respect is applicable to regardless of what's going on with someone with narcissism, right? I talk a lot about narcissism now because I do have experience with it, but it's the pain point that gets people in the door.
Yeah.
And then I can teach them about what did I learn from my experience? Right. Oh, I learned I should be practicing radical self-respect in all areas of my life. So I can always talk about radical self-respect. Now, with the content creators out there, generally what I see is them go through phases. The ones that talk about narcissism, where like I was back with the OGs, like Dr. Grande, Meredith Miller, the guy from Surviving Narcissism, Dr. Romney. They don't usually do it consistently. Like they'll do spurts and then they'll fall off. And then like Dr. Grande, he changed it up and he talks about current events now. So I think eventually with the narcissism topic, I kind of think they run out of stuff to talk about eventually without repeating themselves. So they kind of change it up a little bit. But there will always be a need for it because there's no shortage of toxic behaviors out there. There's no shortage of people doing some wild stuff in relationships. So there's always going to be a need for it. It's just going to be a matter of like what you do with it, what I do with it, and what that looks like.
Right. And I love that point you just made. There's no shortage of toxic behavior, but there is a shortage of awareness.
Yes.
There is a shortage of awareness. So that's why we're here. That's why we're here, is to create awareness for this and to let you know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. I keep making this analogy. This is not forever. It might feel like it's forever, man. Oh, I know those times. And it felt like this is never going to end. Whether I was in the relationship or out of the relationship, there were times I was like, this is my destiny and I am destined to be the abused person of narcissistic abuse. And I can promise you, things do get harder when you get out, but they also do get better because, you know, you find out again, like you find out how to rectify those mistakes you made in the past so that the rest of your life can be the best of your life.
Right. And I think what happens to those people is they get stuck with the familiar pain. The familiar pain is more comfortable to them, to the possibilities of new and uncomfortable pain in something different. And just that fear, I think, keeps people stuck. And I get it. New things can be scary, but challenging ourselves like that, I think that is the way out. Remembering this too shall pass. Those little sayings, as corny as they can be sometimes, they're the things that help me the most when push comes to shove.
Yeah, and it's truly a metamorphosis, right? You're truly turning from the caterpillar into the butterfly because it fucking let's keep being cheesy, man. It does get better. It does get better, and the food tastes better. The coffee is stronger. The sky is bluer, and the women are more beautiful than my ex was. You know what I mean? Like everything gets harder, but it does get better, and there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely, my man. So, Mac, where can everyone find you again, and point them in the direction of your merch store too?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at dimming_the_gaslight. Same on TikTok is dimming_the_gaslight. I'm on Twitter at Dimming Gaslight because I couldn't fit the. And yeah, you can check out my merch store. Is dimmingthegaslight.myshopify.com. And I want to point this out. A lot of people are reaching out to me and saying, can you make me a custom shirt with, whatever I want on the back or the front or whatever it is. So if you have something that you want me to make for you, I can make it for you. So, it's cool. I've gotten a lot of orders. It's only been up for like 2 or 3 weeks, but I've gotten a lot of orders and, a lot of reviews, and people are saying like, it's a good message and, it's applicable to them. So I'm really happy that it resonates with people. And, shoot me a DM. I do my best to answer all DMs. But I'm here. The podcast is available on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, wherever you can get your podcast. And, I'd appreciate it if you enjoy it. Give it 5 stars, leave a review. Feel free to comment on Spotify, and I will post your reviews. I'm everywhere, man. I'm trying to be helpful. I'm trying to be of use, I
mean, you're doing great work, and I think you're helping a lot of people, and that's evident with the following that you've developed. And this point here by Marissa again is spot on too, I think. Sometimes we go through these horrible experiences to help others.
That's exactly how I see it, Marissa. So thank you. Yeah, I'm giving you the heart hands right now. I appreciate you. That's bingo, right? Like, because I don't know if you relate to this, but like I have a hard time sitting back and going like, how would I have ever like just walk the streets of the world with this burning story inside of me and just like not verbally vomiting it on everybody, right? Like, and this platform and my listeners and my followers have given me this platform to get it out and to get your story out there. So if you want to be a guest on the show, you can also email me, dimmingthegaslight@gmail.com. Again, I do my best to respond to all these messages. I get a lot, but I'm always looking for people to tell their stories. So if you want to be a guest, let me know.
That'd be pretty cool too. And what you just said there reminded me of what Stephen King says about writing. He says that when you truly have a story to tell, the story is like excrement, and you have to like excrete it from your body. And that's kind of exactly how you just mentioned you needed to share your story. So it's like an excrement that you just need to shed.
You call it excrement. I call it an exorcism.
There you go. I've been thinking about, I met a woman named Reagan the other day, and I keep on thinking about exorcism every time I hear the word Reagan.
It's funny you talk about exorcisms. My girlfriend and I, we've gotten into watching scary movies, and I'm completely unfazed by scary movies because I've lived my nightmares in real life. So I made a tweet the other day. I was like, I watch scary movies and I'm completely unfazed with it. So I think I'm dead inside. I think I'm funny, but people don't get the context.
No, some people get it for sure. But anything else you wanted to share here to wrap things up?
No, dude, I just really thank you for having me on. I hope you'll come over to my podcast and do my podcast with me. I want to give you an open invitation. And this has been great. And thanks for the challenge of being on the other side of the table and doing it live. And I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who commented. Hopefully we got to all the comments and stuff. But I appreciate everybody, and thanks for having me on.
Right on, Mac. It was a pleasure having you. So with that, over and out, everybody. Please remember to like the video if you liked it, subscribe, and to share this video with others that are maybe going through a similar situation with parental alienation or children being weaponized against you and all that kind of stuff. So over and out.
Thanks, guys.